Much, Mayor.
We
City
appreciate
Council,
it.
City Manager.
Light rail extension, Brian. We're glad to have you, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for having me back. Before you at your places, you'll see a kind of a slimmed down version of the briefing that was in Friday's packages, and I'll talk about some of the updates from that. Basically, what we're here today to do is since you received a lot of different information over the past several months about the light rail extension project, we kind of wanted to wrap them all together in a more comprehensive briefing. And doing that, in terms of the order of that, we want to talk about increasing mobility options, advancing strategic growth. We want to talk about the project itself in terms of the cost controls that we have implemented as in terms of managing the project and some of the context for other transportation projects in the city. Talk about overall connectivity that is in your adopted master transportation plan and the region's 2040 long-range transportation plan. And then, of course, we're available for discussion after that. I've shown this particular slide a number of times on a number of different projects because it relates throughout the city. And overall, we're looking to get some transportation infrastructure that supports 6 of the 8 strategic growth areas that straddle I-264 to the south and Virginia Beach Boulevard to the north, while protecting our suburban neighborhoods, which are the yellow areas, and of course our rural south, which is about half of the city. In doing so, we help to give an indication to the market that in terms of redevelopment and where we're investing first in infrastructure is the Newtown and Pembroke strategic growth areas. Because when you extend light rail to the very eastern side of the Pembroke SGA, it provides a signal to the market that that is connected infrastructure that is permanently in place to support the stations and the transit-oriented development that's nearby. And of course, Pembroke being your central business district is where we're looking for that to be the main employment center for the city. And then after that, in terms of in the future, with whatever technology it is, the Pembroke station, the Constitution station, could act as a hub to radiate different modes of transit from there. So why are we here? We're advancing the project based on previous council direction coming away from the 2012 referendum and the study of the 4th alignment alternative, which we believe is a sustainable alignment alternative that's affordable and practical to implement in the short term. From March of 2014, and then about a year and a half ago, City Council made that locally preferred alternative decision to extend light rail technology, the TIDE, to Town Center. The 2 main components of that decision. And there are 4 capital projects that were associated with that to improve public transportation throughout the city. The first one was the main project, the light rail extension project, 3.5 miles, which would create essentially about 11-mile system. And with a grant first offered by the state of $155 million in 2014, the most recent project estimates are a city contribution between $59 million and $88 million, depending on contingency used. This is a map of the overall system of adding an eastbound station to Newtown and then 3 new stations in the red for overall 14 stations within that 10.9, 11-mile segment of light rail transit in Southampton roads. The updated boardings that we presented to you last week, we're looking at in terms of after the first year of full operation in 2020 of roughly 1.92 million riders within that Newtown to Town Center segment, but 2.349 million boardings overall within that 11-mile segment. So the second project, and looking at this comprehensively as a multimodal transportation series of projects and integrated, is this is the Hampton Roads Transit proposed section of 28 feet of double-tracked light rail and within that 66-foot wide right-of-way. And we are looking to, and council has approved the capital project to parallel with light rail, and that's a shared use pathway on the south side and a sidewalk on the north side, handling drainage between that, but also utilities and potentially some technology of fiber and a duct bank also within that right of way. And this is kind of a rendering of the station and the pedestrian bike bridge paralleling each other over Independence Boulevard, the busiest arterial in the city, behind Dick's parking garage there heading east. And this is a trip sponsored by Tidewater Bicycle Association that went down to Charlotte back in 2014 to find out what their 3 miles or so of their 9.4 mile system, how that worked for them in terms of integrating pedestrian connectivity. And the point to this is that it's easier to get between your stations from transit-oriented development, whether it be as a worker, office worker, somebody working in a restaurant, or somebody living nearby. You're starting to see developers invest in that corridor by upgrading the shared use pathway to concrete, enhanced landscaping, nicer light fixtures, and creating a pretty pleasant environment between the stations to get to and from, and also for exercise. You're also seeing some restaurants and other businesses actually front on the corridor in addition to fronting on streets as well. The third project that was approved last year is basically doubling bus service. And that's more weekend hours, more evening hours, new routes, and including a circulator around town center to all four quadrants of the core business district itself. The new routes, and kind of briefly highlighted them last week. A main one, an important one, is one that comes down from your Witch Duck station, that yellow line there, and then comes north-south through Kempsville, West Kempsville, Centerville, and then through the Greenbrier area with the major transfer at Greenbrier Mall. Another main route adding to the system would be from the oceanfront through Hilltop, down the Lynn Haven corridor with a major transfer there at Tidewater Community College. And then an express route tying into your hub station at Town Center, going eastbound to the oceanfront. And what's important to note is that the busiest bus route in HRT system in the entire peninsula and south side is that Route 20 that goes from downtown Norfolk to the oceanfront, which parallels basically our light rail corridor. It signals, some opportunity for success and boardings and ridership there. But the 28, what that does, that new express route, is it goes pretty close to nonstop from the oceanfront to Town Center with very limited stops, and then the circulator there at Town Center in the very center of your developed part of the city. So we talked about paratransit briefly last week. Just wanted to touch on the fact that you would have significant expansion of paratransit services throughout the city, in addition to within the corridors of the new routes. Again, this map shows kind of the orange areas being high concentrations of elderly populations based on the most recent census, with the red dots being elderly care facilities located within the city. In terms of operating costs, you're looking at roughly $2.7 million a year of operation for the city's share of light rail operations and maintenance, and then expanded bus service, basically doubling bus service for a combined operation and maintenance budget of roughly $11.9 million, or 0.57% of the city's budget, just over 1/2 of the city's budget. We were asked to provide some context there in terms of what city services cost in general in the budget, and then what a couple other localities, one that is in the process of extending light rail in Charlotte, and one in Buffalo that has kept their starter line there, what they currently pay, and operations and maintenance for their transit. The fourth and final project that's related to improving public transportation throughout the city, and it's directly related to amenities to get on bus service and then to light rail, is improving accessibility, the cleanliness, and the overall design and communication of the 510 bus stops that are throughout the city. Right now, we have roughly 30 shelters in the city, and we're looking to at least triple that. A signal to the private sector of city investment is them actually approaching us and saying, what can we do to also improve accessibility? In the case of REI at Pembroke Mall, they approached the city and offered to do bike parking and an HRT shelter actually on their property. That's actually within their property. They funded with their capital dollars and then are maintaining that moving forward. And this was a picture, two folks are in there waiting for the bus there. This is a picture from a couple weeks ago that has come to fruition. So it's important to note that coming away from City Council's previous decision in May of 2015, the locally preferred alternative decision, we took that information to the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, and as a board, actually adopted the construction project from Newtown Road to Constitution Drive as part of the 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan for the region. We also identified study funding to look at extending it further east, to the north, and to the south as well. So that's actually part of the region's adopted 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan. Also under study right now that HRT is coordinating with Norfolk on is the Norfolk Naval Base is Naval Station Norfolk Transit Extension Study. We know that the majority of commuters come from Virginia Beach at roughly 23%. This is a letter that was in your packets on Friday. Don't expect you to read the screen, but from your Military Economic Development Advisory Committee and the folks that signed on to that letter. It's actually supporting both a multimodal transportation network in our city, in our region, as well as the light rail extension project itself. And that was that went out October 26th. In terms of capital costs, Mr. Hanson showed this to you about a month ago, but again, we're trying to wrap all the information up together in one brief. You're looking at, on the state's contribution, overall project costs of roughly $243.1 million with a good bit of contingency wrapped into that. So the city's contribution could be anywhere between $59.3 and $88.1 million. Just to provide some context on some recent and pending construction projects, the Princess Anne Kempsville intersection is roughly $90.1 million recently completed. The Lesnar Bridge, which is about 60% complete, at roughly $119.5 million at a quarter mile. And then one direction of 1/4 of the interchange of I-64, I-264, basically going north and eastbound from Chesapeake to Virginia Beach, includes two new collector distributor lanes and a flyover, is roughly $345 million, and that's to be done in two phases. So we briefed you in February about transit-oriented development and what that is. It's basically creating a walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly community that's a little bit less dependent on the automobile, a mixed-use community that is in your comprehensive plan to accommodate 50% or more of the city's future growth. It's meant to improve access to jobs, where you live, where you shop, basically to have an opportunity, a choice, to be able to live your life within several blocks of each other, and then get on transit, Uber, or your car, and go to other parts of the city or the region. Here is a summary of some of the transit-oriented development that has occurred throughout the country from about a year or so of preliminary engineering all the way until 2 years after. And in terms of demographics, I think we've kind of communicated to you before that as of the first quarter of last year, millennials have taken over as the largest percentage of the 150 million or so workforce in the country. And census data, American Community Survey data tells us that millennials are driving 20% less, and also in general looking for additional options to get around. What we're looking at within this project's corridor, within a half a mile, is these are the totals there. We are looking for some residential development, also a good bit of office space to support large employers, also commercial space to support both the employers and residents, as well as hotel rooms. And there's a couple of proposals that are out there on that. We have Ron Berkebile here. He's the economic analyst that worked with Dr. Agarwal with Old Dominion University on the two studies that were in your packets this Friday. This chart's a little different than the one you received because we updated it to provide some context. The red line is a baseline of if the light rail project were not implemented, what is projected to be the growth of value starting at about $566.7 million today, going out 50 years. And the yellow line is with average growth. So basically, if the SGAs, the Newtown and Pembroke SGAs, were to build out at roughly 50% at kind of a middle level of quality, that is the increase in real estate value that you're looking at. And if you add the existing value today to the projected value, that's the blue line at the top. And this is a chart where you can kind of choose, in association with the light rail extension project, if you believe there would be modest development, which would be roughly 25% built out of the SGAs, and a lower quality, which is that Class AA, or all the way to the Class B or Class A 50-year, it gives a more ambitious projection. And what we're looking at is, for example, at year 20, the green circles, roughly a net new tax revenue of $165 million in year 20 within a half mile of the corridor. In terms of jobs, there's a couple of different methodologies that were used to project the job growth. One is to extrapolate out from the transit-oriented development projections I just talked about, the jobs by category, if you were, and comparing that to the Virginia Employment Commission's trajectory, which is based on historical data. The good news is that jobs would grow either way, but they would grow 10,500 more with the light rail extension project, according to the study and the methodology associated with it. And so this particular graph shows that the light rail extension, averaging it out compared to the baseline of the VEC model of what the employment projections are predicted to be, and this is within the Pembroke SGA only. Again, 10,500 more jobs with the light rail extension project. So where we're at today is we updated you on the O&M costs and kind of reemphasized them in the broader picture today. We have an opportunity to finish the design of the shared use pathway, as well as the duct bank for undergrounding utilities and city fiber, making it a true connectivity corridor through the center of the developed part of the city. And all things moving forward, the RFP would be issued by the end of November. In summary, in terms of trending with the project, and that's what this slide is meant to do, is that the project costs overall, since we've been working with it, have come down substantially, the capital costs. We're looking to increase bus service with extending that fixed skyway transit into the city. It's very important to emphasize that it's a very symbiotic relationship between bus service and linking into that 99% on-time service with very limited stations. So you increase the reliability and predictability, but also limit the amount of buses that are stuck in the same traffic as motor vehicles. Overall, looking forward, it's roughly just over 0.5% of the city's budget for the O&M costs. We believe, based on the methodology and the study that's been completed with Dr. Agarwal's concurrence, that there would be $165 million new tax revenue to the city, as well as 10,500 new jobs. And then the updated boardings, that does not include is weekend, day, tourism, or special events, or it does not predict extensions to Naval Station Norfolk or any other extension in the future. With that, I'll stand by for any questions, and Ron Berkebaugh is here as well if you have questions about the study.
Mr. Jones has, thank you for the presentation, Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian, I'd hoped we would get some presentation on where the city of Norfolk is on their possible plans for constructing light rail both to ODU and to the naval station. Do you have a sense of where they are on that?
So we provided you a very brief update summary in your packets on Friday, and they're about to launch into the FTA is looking to make Norfolk choose a preferred corridor. And so there's going to be another series of analysis about whether it's the Western Corridor, parallel on Hampton Boulevard, to Old Dominion University, the ports, and Naval Station Norfolk, or if it's the Eastern Corridor through Military Highway, past the airport, Little Creek Road Corridor to Naval Station Norfolk. So to answer your question, they're about to launch into determining which of those two corridors would be the preferred corridor.
Are they doing engineering studies, or what are they doing?
They are funded to do an alternatives analysis and then go through that same NEPA process to get ranked for federal funding. So to answer your question, they're in the study.
Do you have any sense of what the time frame is for that?
What I've been communicated to me is 18 months to 2 years, they would be roughly completed that process. And
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Other questions or comments? John?
Since we've had our second in a week campaign before the election, I just thought it'd be good to talk about some other things that weren't mentioned. And so I spent some time doing some analysis. So I thought I would go and look at Charlotte. I'd go look at Raleigh, and I'd look at Virginia Beach, and just kind of see how the stuff translates down to per capita income, median family income before they had light rail in 2007, and just see how the communities look. Because in the end, this is about making people wealthier, not our balance sheet wealthier, not people who build buildings wealthier, or not people who get tax subsidies wealthier. But is their median income higher or lower? In fact, in Charlotte, it's lower. In fact, in real terms, adjusted 2005 to 2015, their median family income is lower, and it fell more from those 2 times of real terms. Now, Raleigh, during the same time, actually went up. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Then you would think if you built out this tremendous amount of infrastructure and had all this development, that since per capita income includes many things other than wages, that you would think that places that made that kind of substantial investment would see a real gain, or at least better gain than places that didn't have that kind of substantial, because you have all that income and rent coming in, which shows up. But the statistics don't bear that out. The per capita income, in fact, is not higher. It's lower. And whose is higher? Raleigh. Now, there are some examples of statecality. My only point of mentioning this is not to say that you can draw conclusive conclusions from that, but it also says is that we're making forecasts and making speculative things without knowing that that's true, because it hasn't proven out in many cities. You can look at Portland, look at their affordability housing index. You can look at most people have went across the border to move into Washington County because of the restrictive land use policies. There's just lots of stuff that you talk about. But when you go and look at the data, it will at least make a bell go off and say, wait a minute, where is that translating to higher living standards in a personal income perspective for the households? And the data doesn't show it. And then you can go and look at unemployment. Now, unemployment in August of 2016 was 4.5 in Virginia Beach. It's a little bit lower than that now, but this is August, the data. It was 4.4 into Charlotte. This is the SMA, because that's how the data is collected. And it was 4.0 in Raleigh. Kind of interesting. So then I said, well, what are all these different places doing? So I went and did a lot of insert. Great about Google. You can look up everything. Well, there is a transit referendum in Raleigh this November. And guess what they did? They rejected the light rail as even something to put in place. They are doing commuter rail. You got to go back and look at the article. They went and, that's 857 square miles is the size of Wake County. That's pretty substantial. Their population is expected to double by 2045. Nothing in our region is forecasted in anything be of that nature. A lot driven by the spin-off stuff from the universities and the research is drawing a lot of that stuff, not unlike you see in Palo Alto, not like you see in Boston. Kind of an interesting dynamic. They're tripling their bus service, and then on these, because they realized that the more you stop, you don't do well, they're then using rapid bus transit. And then future, they're looking at, unlike the Virginia Rail Express, they're looking at commuter rail to do much further distances, but they're not. Their own economist and their own land planner said that for an urban part of it, that light rail was not the best solution for moving the frequency of people. I'm just doing that as a contrast, because I know that certainly, I think a fair and balanced analysis would kind of cover all the solutions, but we didn't cover that solution. Now, if you go and look at page, well, you would have with you, page 5 of the DAIS, and you go to your slide 8, if you would, please.
It's like the clicker of the television remote. Just
I
can't
don't know
get
how
there.
that is.
Okay? I know, I can.
I think that one. Now, if you will notice, back when the Norfolk originally did their submission using the Federal Transit Agency model to do their thing, they later denied it, but it's actually published on the internet. You can find it. Their initial projection was 10,400 average weekday riders. That was the original projection for the 7 miles in Norfolk. Well, you can see, you average that out, that goes up to quite a few when you annualize that, not counting weekends. That gets you about $2.7 million number. So they're basically achieving 50% of what they said they would achieve at that time frame. 50%. Now, if you look at the number that's in 2020, and you take that 2,349,600,000, which is the total, and you take off 1,192,700, you actually have 240,700 less annual riders on the Norfolk segment in 2020 than you had in 2015. I don't know where they went. I don't know what happened to them going to the bus, but it's just an interesting explanation of, and so that number obviously translated up. So you got to ask yourself, now when you go out here and look at this thing in 2034, they were saying, not counting visitors, 2,838, 2.8 million total ridership. So in 2034, but you're really saying that you're going to get 103% increase over the base, which is 234,960 minus 100 increase in Virginia Beach riders. I went out and looked. I don't believe that's true. And there is no system that has achieved that in the United States. Not a one. Not a one. And you're saying you're going to do that in the first full year of operation. I don't believe it, and the historical data set doesn't validate it. It just doesn't make sense. But the important piece of that is the conclusions of the DEIS, which gets back to the fundamental thing, because this presupposes that the voters on November 8th say yes. And they might not. They might, but they might not. But this acts like this is all a done deal, and those next steps are just the reverse if they choose something else. So in the end, it's the voters watching who get to decide, not us. Because 6 of us is that we're going to, if they say yes, I'm all in. I hope they say no. But if they say yes, I'll be the biggest advocate. But if they say no, I'll be the fastest person to undo this rigmarole that we've been involved with, this waste of money. Now, there are no empirical studies, maybe you have one you can show, that actually say that any form of transit, be it road, rail, light rail, independently drives economic development. There just is not one. There are lots of factors. Palo Alto doesn't have light rail. Palo Alto doesn't have a lot of stuff. They have a lot of economic development. They have a lot of wealthy people. They have a very vibrant community. But they don't have, so you can't, you're making these projections, but you're not acknowledging how many subsidies has to take place. For example, we made Town Center happen without any transit. We didn't care how much congestion it would get. I remember when Bob Scott said that. I was here. But we did it by what? Taxpayer, tax expenditures, and tax subsidies. We created a marketplace by the use of other people's money through the power of government, which is coercion. We created a market that did not exist. And now we're saying we're going to use additional tax expenditures, because that's what the SJ report says. We can't make these things happen without infrastructure, parking, all things provided by the taxpayers, either by direct subsidy or by tax expenditures. That is an opportunity cost. I don't see where that is accounted for in the whole thing. But the important thing is it comes at the expense of someone else who doesn't get the business. Why is that the role of government, to decide which geographical areas are successful and then to subsidize them to give them a competitive advantage to be successful? So I think the numbers are a little suspect. I don't think that ridership will be achieved, and I certainly wouldn't bet my pension on it. And And then if you go, and the other part, which I think people should ask themselves is, you know, usually when we do big work, the DEIS in Norfolk, they're going to have to go out and do what? Let the public look at that for 45 days. Why? Because I think the government understands that there is an inherent bias, an agency bias, to what? To make the thing you're already committed to look good and to overlook weaknesses. So they have a very robust vetting process, so you can get people from the Cato Institute and from Brookings, which, matter of fact, Randall O'Toole is in town, and he's from Cato, an international expert on transportation. So other people can take a look and see the weaknesses. Look at the assumptions. Is the modeling as good as it is? Even in that report, it says we took a model from Texas and said we could extrapolate it to us, but the reliability and scalability and the actual independent validation that in fact it is, that wasn't done. The report also acknowledges that the number of sample sets was too small to be making a statistically significant conclusion. Well, and it says that 3 times in that report. I think people need to understand, when you see all these numbers, if you were doing an SEC filing trying to issue bonds, you'd have a lot of footnotes because you wouldn't want to be taking on legal liability for representations that cannot be materially substantiated and independently validated. Now, this may be a good bet, and Lord knows if they vote yes, I'm going to make it a good bet. That'll be my commitment. But I think people would be naive to suggest as they read through these documents that this is all true. It is a forecast. It is a speculative forecast. Portland, despite all their liability, is the 12th highest congested city in the United States. I mean, I'd make that up. You can go look at it. They have lots of issues. All communities have lots of issues. But to suggest you're going to get those kind of economic growth rates when you look at the report just issued by Dr. Cook, State of the Region 2016, and you look at the CBO congressional budget for the next 10 years, look at national real growth rates of 2%, where is the analysis that says you can beat the national average real growth rates when the forecast is that we're going to underperform the real national growth rates? Where is the analysis? Where is the empirical data set? What are the assumptions that says we can make that happen? That is not in that analysis. I have no doubt if you walk through all that math, it all's true, but it all comes back to the foundation that the math rests on, and it is weak. It is speculative. And people need to understand that. And in some cases, those numbers, I think, are just fantasy. There's no basis to show where those make sense. I've written like a 9-page analysis. I couldn't even get to all of it because it's a lot to read. But I think it's important that the public knows that there is a difference between an assessment and a belief. Because in the end, the consultants are betting with the public's money. If they bet wrong, you can't go back. There's no one's issuing you a performance bond on the results. But once you go down this road, you can't go back. But I think it's instructive to look at Raleigh, to look at Charlotte, to look at Buffalo, which has been no huge success. You know, Carrie Dockery's written about it several times herself. But where it's failed, why has it failed? And where it's been successful, why was it successful? You know, that's important to understand. And do we have that foundational thing? Because what did Dr. Cook say the biggest thing holding back our region? And I know you've heard him say it yourself, Mr. Mayor, is what? Skilled workforce shortage. He said it over and over, and he said it in the 2014 and 2000. That's one of our biggest issues, is skilled workforce. These are things, transportation doesn't make that great. People make it great. And if you don't have those things, and you go back and look at the income and say, well, why is it that these places, why didn't it move real family incomes? Why did they stay flat? They got a big employer, Wells Fargo, 28,000 people in Charlotte. Bank of America, 15,000 people in Charlotte. They had a central city long before light rail, long before they probably had bus service. It was a financial hub, as you may well, Covia sold out to Wells Fargo. You probably remember. So they had this big, huge engine. 28,000 people is like Newport News shipbuilding. That's huge. 24,000 people work at the Pentagon. So they had that critical mass of central employment when they started. The proposition here is that we can artificially create a linear central city. Now, maybe we can. It's never been done. But that's what that rail corridor is, just to create this linear kind of central city and to make it happen by tremendous amount of tax expenditures. And I don't believe that the public gets an honest understanding of all the underpinnings of this and what it translates to. It's like the old saying, you know, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your health plan. That's what they say, but once you get it, you find out, oops, that's not really true. I think we find out that a lot of this stuff will not happen, but the bill will still be here. And that's the point I wanted to get across. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Any other questions or comments? I want to thank you very much for your presentation. I am optimistic that what you've said is good information, you know, but looking ahead, I believe this is and again, I want to defend, this was information, this was not a political statement, and I kind of want to be fair there, and because this council did give him guidance some time ago through votes on what the next steps were, and that I would just ask that you respect what I said.
I do that, but it's the
Okay.
staging of when it's happening is certainly
Great.
suspect.
All right, Barbara?
If I could make a comment, I know you asked for it, but I want to also thank Brian. Back at the very beginning of the year, knowing that this was a year that there was going to be a lot happening in light rail, and my concern that all of the information as it came available should go out to the public, I asked Brian to come to each month's district forum that I have to give an update on what was happening, and he has done that, and I really appreciate all the overtime that he spent doing that, because I think so much has happened, but we knew it was going to happen in these stages, and we knew when it was going to happen. It's not something that's just happenstance because there's an election. We knew these things were being developed, and we knew when they were due to be developed, and so forth. And so, you know, we have had the updates, and I appreciate Brian being willing not only to come to my forum, but I'm sure anybody who asked him to go out and give the public all the information. And I think that's the important thing, that, you know, we put all this out for the people to have and digest, even the audits as that came along, which I don't think maybe we had anticipated. But I think there's a lot of information available now, but of course we won't have that final important information until we get actually the bid. And that's when we will have, I think, completed and fulfilled what we were told to do in 2012 when the people voted for us to proceed and develop all of the financing and development of light rail and figuring out what it was going to be. But I really, these two reports that we got that we had the ODU input on, one of them that, and my goodness, this is deep, but the fact that with this light rail and what we're doing along these SGAs is redevelopment. And I think that word is so key because, and I think that's what he had in his modeling study, that this is redevelopment. And I think that's one of the things that maybe we miss. We're not talking about, you know, brand new areas. We're talking about redeveloping. And of course, we don't have a redevelopment housing authority, so how are we going to get the private development to do the redevelopment that we want? And I think that's really an important thing. And I thought this was an extremely good document that we had, and I appreciate all of this, and I'll read it about 3 times and maybe I'll begin to understand it.
Other questions or comments before we move on?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
I read the draft DIS just like you, John, and a lot of what you say is correct, that, you know, and many of the things about economic development and so forth that are assumptions by members of the public or out there are not substantiated by the drafted EIS. I guess the real issue, the way I'm trying to look at this, as far as the light rail project, proposed light rail project is concerned, is does it, number one, is there a need? And if there's a need, does it does it provide or a function that will serve the public purpose for transportation? And then third, do we need an expanded public transportation system, mobile public transportation system versus more roads and so forth? And that's why I asked about, when are we going to get a presentation on whether or not Norfolk is going to be able to take light rail or to the naval base or to ODU and so forth. If this project doesn't provide a transportation system to get people to areas of need, then we shouldn't be spending the money on it. On the other hand, if it does provide a way to get people to where they need to get, it's not any different than any other part of our transportation system, including roads and so forth. And I'm not concerned about whether light rail turns a profit. What I'm concerned about is does it meet a public need that is not being met at this time? And is the cost of it reasonable in terms of how it meets that public need? And, it just seems to me that we need to know what Norfolk's going to do in terms of their those two projects in order for us to make a reasonable and intelligent decision. And as soon as we can get that information, we really need to see it, because it's hard to make an intelligent decision until we have that information.
Okay, we have a few more speakers. Bobby Deach and Wood, then Davenport, then John Moss.
Yeah, thank you. I really wasn't going to comment. I think, my opinions are a matter of record, pretty much known to anybody. But, Vice Mayor, I thought, brought some valid points up. And I think the basis of my objection to light rail is that we're doing everything very piecemeal here. Okay, let's vote on light rail and then we'll figure out what we're going to do later. Meanwhile, we got strategic growth areas. They're going to go to Hilltop, to the ocean front, and everything else. We're in the dark about whether Norfolk is going to get us, which really makes sense, to get to ODU, to get to the naval base. That was where the real practical application of this would be today. And I was given assurances that light rail would stop at town center, and another mode of transportation, if necessary, would get us to the ocean front. Well, what's lacking here, to me, is an overarching, executable strategic finance plan that shows the public a overall transportation solution. And, the thing is, and it was very distressing to me, and I think it was brought out in an editorial on Sunday by a gentleman, that there was a lack of civic engagement about light rail. Now, I know some people are going to say, oh, we've been doing stuff, but the way I saw the communication was all basically one-way communication, indoctrination by the proponents, and the advocacy of the city. And that to me, a number of months ago, I asked for Dr. Cook to come in and talk to us. I was the one that requested Aubrey Lane come in to give the one side. I really wanted to hear what the proponents had to say about it. And today, I haven't been convinced that light rail is not a solution to a problem that really exists, that light rail is going to solve. And the point is, I wanted a balanced presentation. And based on the article that this gentleman wrote in the editorial, there just wasn't enough civic engagement of back and forth nature to properly educate the public on the pros and cons. And, we have to be concerned excuse me, the law of unintended consequences. We build these things, then what's next? Is the Independence Exchange going to adequately handle the increased traffic? Woodstock Exchange is already a disaster. What other costs are we going to have to incur to make a system work? So the point is, of course, this amount now, but what's going to happen? They're going to say, oh, no, now we have to take some kind of thing to the ocean front. Now, what will that be? You know, will it be some type of elevated? Biggest problem we have with our current system, it's ground level, and we're attaching to a city that has water problems. I think good, prudent decisions would mean we need more of an elevated system. We need a system that can go north-south too. You know, we have anecdotal conversations about, we got to do something to get it up and down Independence and, down Windhaven into the thing. But, there's no plan right now. So what are the eventual costs going to be? And I think that is the missing component that we're having here that's creating so much ambivalence out in the public. And, I'm out in the public, my job takes me in many people's homes. And there's people skeptical about what we're doing it. But I think it's this piecemeal approach. Let's do it now and figure out the rest later that I really think is confounding people. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Wood?
I was going to start out to answer a couple of things that Louis said, but I did want to mention on a couple of things that Bobby mentioned, and I agree with you. I mean, primarily a lot of these events that have been scheduled are pep rallies for either side, and I think both sides will admit that. I will tell you that during this entire storm and everything, the tide never stopped running. The buses did, but the tide kept running, and I confirmed that with HRT, so they don't have the elevation issues that everybody talks about. Probably a more important thing, and going back to the Vice Mayor's point, and we had this discussion, was it last week, Brian? Was that HR? I'm getting it because we have another one next week because of Thanksgiving. Norfolk is moving forward on this. It's a question for them which direction they're going to go. They made it abundantly clear to me. Commissioner Riddick, who is back on Councilman Riddick, who's back on, made it abundantly clear that they're moving forward. Frankly, it appears that because of their ward system, different people want it in their wards. And so that's why it's kind of jockeying around, whether it's a route, as Brian mentioned, up Military Highway, or if it's the circuitous route from going past ODU to the naval base. So they're working on it. It's just a question of which way it goes. Brian, did you want to address also the issue about commuter rail? Because I think that's an important component. You had a discussion with the Department of Rail and Public Transit on Thursday as well.
About which piece?
Expansion.
Yes. So a connectivity piece we didn't even mention is that the Amtrak station in Norfolk will receive 2 new trains to expand the frequency of service out of Southampton roads to the northeast corridor, and that would be during the day or night. They haven't spelled out the timeframes yet, but there'd be one train coming in at the end of 2017, early 18, and then one following that, in addition to the one that's there. So the point would be that to give you options to get not only around the city and the region, but then to also take a train to the northeast corridor, Richmond, Washington, D.C., and points northeast from there. And that's something that's already been budgeted in the state's CIP as well.
Yeah, so we know that the commuter rail is going to expand beyond what it is right now, so that would be another connectivity piece that frankly, that particular would not require any changes to routes because of the early or late aspect of it, because you're talking about one that's more in the middle part of the day. So that's also some good information. But I just wanted to address a couple of those things because I live this stuff with the Norfolk folks all the time. They constantly are talking about it, and they constantly want to know what I think we're going to do. And that's, I think they're committed to making what they have work as best that they can. So I think a lot depends upon what we do. I think, frankly, if we don't proceed, it's probably much more likely that they would take the eastern route. I think if we proceed, they will probably take more of the western route so that perhaps we could eventually take an eastern route towards the airport. I think that's kind of what their thinking is. From what I've heard from a number of them, and there's been a change on their council, so I don't know what some of the new folks think about that, but everybody that I've talked to has indicated that they are dedicated to moving it forward. It's just which direction.
Ben?
I'd just like to address a couple of John's comments, and like John, I've committed to abide by the will of the voters, and I hopefully look forward to voting for light rail on November 9th. But you know, you bring up Charlotte, North Carolina, and you speak about it like it's a metropolis that's been there for years. Well, in 1970, Charlotte was a sleepy little town. Charlotte had leaders at that time who planned for the future, who made investments so that the financial sector could thrive. And actually, the largest employer is not Wells Fargo. The largest employer is actually Duke Energy in the city of Charlotte. And you look at the growth that they've had and that they continue to have. You know, and I think that light rail has certainly, if you've been there since 2008, played an important factor. If you look at the South End area where the light rail line originates, that area was indisputably a rundown industrial area with nobody living there, with no retail, with no commerce. Now that area is the most densely populated area of that city. Now, John, you know this as well as anybody. There are no large tracts of land left in the city of Virginia Beach to develop single-family neighborhoods. You know, we have to, and I think that you would agree, or maybe you wouldn't, and you could correct me. I think that growth is very important for any city, especially for us. I think that growth ultimately correlates to keeping our real estate taxes low. You know, but you seem to have a problem for every solution. And I want to know, I mean, is growth important to you? And if so, what is your plan to grow the city of Virginia Beach? The plan for light rail is to build up these strategic growth areas that are well planned. And it's not so far-fetched to think that Virginia Beach couldn't grow to become a city as equally prominent as Charlotte, not prominent, but as equally successful with the biomedical initiative that we're doing right now with Charlotte, North Carolina. We're planning for the future. Things happen by planning. And so what's your plan?
Thank you for asking.
Please, thank you. I want to hear it.
Maybe we got about an hour. I think I can take all that. So,
Reasonable, just
I was-
what you can.
but the issue is, I believe in growing people's incomes.
Oh, that's not what we're talking about.
No, it is, because you can
No.
go out in places in the West Coast. I've been out where,
Well, you just said Charlotte, the median population. Does that mean Charlotte is a failing city?
No, I
Charlotte
just
is a
said-
model for
you
growth
asked
in the
me a
United
question,
States.
would you like an answer?
I'd like an
I'll
answer
come
to
back
the
another
question that
time.
I
Okay,
asked,
come
not
back
a
to the point I
question that
was
you're
gonna make.
presenting to
Ben,
everybody.
let's go ahead and let's
I'd like
wind this
to
up.
get to my
And
point,
John,
and
go
We
ahead.
can have a separate forum, and I'll come to it. But the question, I think, is ultimately, what's the purpose of transportation? To allow people to move at a place and time of their own choosing. It's the freedom of movement. And I don't know how many people have already read Peter Thiel's book, you know, 0 to 1, great book. But he talks about transformative technologies and how things, he said, if you went back and you looked at the street of New York City in 1903, there's this big picture, if you probably have seen this picture, it's all full of horses and there's one car. They go back 1911, the same angled photo, it's all cars and there's one horse. Pretty phenomenal. I don't know who all arranged that, but pretty good for the good photo. But the point is, the car was a very transformative piece, as the cell phone has been. And there are two big things happening that the people and generally the futurists tend to think are going to be transformative in the 21st century. And it was pretty funny, one of them I wasn't even thinking of it. One is the decentralized production of electricity, because the price of producing solar cells is falling exponentially. And at the same time, the efficiency of solar cells is almost growing exponentially. And there's a place in there where that's going to have a huge impact. And I've talked with people in the power industry, and they're well aware that that's something that's coming. As is the autonomous driving vehicles is a transformative thing that allows people to, whether you're old or young, whatever, to move at a place at a time of your choosing, and will change the nature and the movement of how automobiles are provided.
What's
And
that
it
going to
won't-
cost?
and in fact, it's going to be a market-driven, and believe it, it'll take care of itself. I think that will happen on its own. And I think.
So I guess we got to hope.
Certainly, let's hope the same thing
Your
of that.
kid's been-
But the
But how
point
are we
being,
gonna
but the
grow?
point
How are we gonna
being,
grow?
the point being I was trying to get to is that these are changes. So why make an investment in a fixed rail system that really is looking back? Rather than looking and making a big investment in buses, having less fixed cost and leveraging. Now, I'm the only person who commutes to the base every day that I know of here. I think I'm the only, been driving it for decades. I commuted to the Pentagon, I had a parking space, and I used it. I have a parking space now, and I use it. But I drive every day. And I know, and I've noticed also that the movement of the people, as we've seen, have moved west and south. They've lived out Suffolk, they're not moving this way, our new officers, so there's a change of the movement, a shift of people. And you can look at this report, you can see about 33,000 people back in 2014 went to Norfolk every day, 80,005 people stayed here, about 19,000 came from Norfolk to the beach, about 20,000 are coming from Chesapeake to the beach and vice versa. It's kind of interesting to see the dynamic, but they're moving by vehicles. And why? It gets back to this choice. Unless you can offer people significant time or there's significant income, public transportation by its own admission requires people to endure longer times to get to work. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. Now, you can certainly pay people to pay their transit costs like they do in Northern Virginia.
I'm still, what
Okay,
does this
so-
have to do
so-
with growing the city?
Well,
of
I'm
Virginia
answering
Beach?
my point. You asked a question, this is my time. I'm
Okay.
having my point.
Okay.
But getting back to the point of, this is why, back to his part is, what's the need? The need is for individual time and place of their own choosing transit that's market-driven. It does a better job in the long run. And that's my point. We're making an investment like buying the horse and buggy at the turn of the century. You went and bought a buggy plant. You would have made a big mistake. Well, that's what this is. Not saying I'm opposed to transit. I'm saying that the interim solution, as this other stuff works, is bus, and we're making a mistake. I think Raleigh has more insight into the issue than did Charlotte, in my personal opinion.
Barbara Henley, then we're going to wind up.
John, you sound like you're saying the very same thing you said in 1989 when we voted against it the first time. I mean, that's 25 years ago, nothing has happened, and if we don't do something this time, we'll have another 25 years and nothing will happen, so.
The voters get to choose.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes, sir, then we.
John has no plan for growth. That's the bottom line. And that's the whole crux of the argument with light rail is there is no plan for growth on the no light rail sign. And Bobby, maybe you could answer, what is the plan for growth?
Well, I'll tell you what, technology, and the point is
No
to
plan.
bring modes of transportation that people are actually gonna use, Ben.
Spending other
All right,
people's money on the
folks, this has
subsidies,
been
not
a
plan.
healthy discussion. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I respect everyone's comments. How's that sound? And I think we're going to move on. Okay. It'll be
I'll
over
respect the
Tuesday.
vote. It will be.